And as if the news cannot get any worse, just earlier today, I covered the sanctions and the motion of no confidence that is coming to South Africa. But now it turns out, thanks to John Steenhuisen speaking to the media, it turns out that we're in serious trouble. Literally, in a couple of days from now, well, South African couple, in about 10 days from now, South Africa will face massive tariffs coming from the United States, 30% guaranteed, with another 10% sort of maybe coming into effect at some point in the future, dependent on what Trump decides with BRICS nations. And then there's further tariffs that may actually be implemented as a result of the new bill that was just passed committee in America. Fundamentally, we're in deep, deep, deep trouble if these tariffs go through. We already have the governor of the Central Bank of South Africa, the Reserve Bank of South Africa, warning that over 100,000 jobs will be lost in the immediate effects of the tariffs, because Mercedes has already signaled that they most likely will close their factory here in South Africa should those tariffs come into effect, because the factory here in South Africa produce largely a lot of its components and parts for the American market. And there's no point in making it here if you can't sell it in America at a reasonable price. So from that perspective, that's really bad, and we don't even know what the indirect effects of these sanctions and of these tariffs may actually be. Now it turns out, thanks to John Steenhuisen, it turns out the US won't even talk to us. Like, they're just completely ignoring us. So effectively, on the 20th, or just before the 20th of May, we sent through a proposal. So in that deal, we basically said that we'll import US natural gas and fracking technology in exchange for duty-free quotas for steel and vehicles, because that would protect at least the steel sector as well as the vehicle sector of South Africa. And then also said that we would give US farmers tariff-free access to the local market whenever SA's fruits are not in season, which the US just outright rejected. They said, no, thank you. And basically what they said was, and this was from Jameson Greer, who said, this isn't ambitious enough. You can absolutely do more. So essentially what happened is the government went back to the drawing board and they came up with a whole new proposal for the US to consider. The revised package contained proposals to remove non-tariff measures that the US was unhappy with, including South African restrictions on US poultry imports, which were imposed after a widespread outbreak of bird flu in that country. The US can now determine which of its states can export poultry to South Africa, effectively giving the Americans the power to self-ban and self-lift restrictions. This is not good, right? It would have been fine if you just said that the Americans can trade again. The outbreak of the disease is gone now. It's no longer there. It does happen. It's happened in South Africa as well before. So that doesn't matter. All you have to do is just lift the restrictions. Like, this extra promise that you guys can decide whether or not you send it to us. That's insane, but never mind that, right? So last month, the SA Poultry Association actually said that this offer is an unprecedented and reckless shift that compromises South Africa's disease-free status. Now, the new package also includes concessions on long-standing South African restrictions on imports of pork from the US due to the prevalence of porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome in that country, as well as on US blueberry imports. Now, again, a lot of the restrictions that South Africa has on American goods are not necessarily rational restrictions, right? So while a lot of, yes, there are outbreaks that happen, and America is a very large country that trades with a very many countries, and it borders a lot of countries that import and export a lot of livestock across those borders, that just does mean that disease might be more prevalent. But effectively, how most countries deal with that is they put a temporary ban on imports from that country until the disease is under control, and then they reopen the disease, the imports, right? Because you're not punishing the country. You're just saying, hey, we don't want that disease-ridden stuff here. Sort that out. Effectively, what the South Africans did is, after this broke out, they just sort of went, well, no, ban. We'll just not take this from the US anymore. Now, effectively, what's happened is, since the new proposals has been sent, nothing. Nothing. The US has not responded. They've not even said that they've received the proposal, just zero radio silence from the United States. Now, John Steenhuisen says that I think there's an inertia that's set in because you've got one level of activity taking place by the White House, and then you've got your traditional channels that are not sure what to do. They're also struggling to navigate this new environment. They would send briefings to the White House, and the White House would follow the lead. Now it's the other way around. It's been turned on its head. That's their big problem. So Steenhuisen is effectively saying, well, the reason they're not coming back to us is because they're just busy, right? They've got their hands full trying to deal with the new normal in America, which I think is a little bit of coping from John Steenhuisen, to be fair. I think there's another reality staring us in the face. Yes, the US wants fair and equal trade with South Africa. They want the South Africans to drop all import tariffs on American goods. And there are tons of import tariffs on American goods because this government gets their greedy, grubby little fingers into every element of society. They just can't let anything go, right? And that's what the US is also super sick and tired of. They want full access to our markets the same way that they've granted us full access to theirs. The United States have already made it clear they're not in favor of the violent rhetoric coming out of South African politicians. When you have politicians singing, kill the Boer, kill the farmer, the EFF, now you have an MK politician going on stage and singing one sector, one bullet. That's another thing that just happened, I think late last week, that we were just too busy to actually get to on the channel. But that's another thing that just happened. The US is done, right? They don't want this rhetoric anymore. The US is done with South Africa dealing consistently with their enemies, arming their enemies, aiding their enemies. There's a massive lawsuit, by the way, that I'm waiting and researching to see how that unfolds, but $400 million against the South African government, effectively suggesting that the South African government knew about the October 7th attacks. If that turns out to be true, South Africa might be in deep doo-doo. South Africa has continuously sided with some of the worst elements in this world against the United States and its allies. And the United States has had enough. So I don't think anything we promise the United States is going to suffice, except if we absolutely start to take a hard stance against people singing kill white people, basically, in South Africa. We stop aiding and abetting the enemies of America. We stop siding with massively sort of genocidal, evil terrorist regimes like Iran, right? And if we really care, right, if we really don't like what Israel is doing, we can just stay neutral, right? We don't have to sign books of condolences. We don't have to, send our love and support to Iran after their nuclear facilities are bombed. These are things that are directly created to antagonize the Americans, and it's working. The problem is that we South Africans will be the ones paying the price. And if you're one of those people that's going to comment, well, we don't need America, you don't know what you're talking about. And I would highly suggest that you take your inept and inadequate education and go back to the drawing board. Because we do need the Americans. If the Americans cut off South Africa becomes a pariah state, and we will turn into North Korea faster than you can say, yeah. Africa is already a collection of failed states. We don't want South Africa to become the next one. That's it from me. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this. It's absolutely crazy that we're living in this era, but if you like what I do, if you want to support the channel and you think more people should be able to see what I do, please consider hitting the like, consider leaving a comment, and subscribing to the channel. It does help out a ton. To all of the patrons, and if you want to support this channel, become a member or a patron, link in the description down below, or just hit the button below this video that says join on it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.